guys, and welcome to Be Heard Talk, an award-winning talk show that adds a taste of hip-hop, a side of Shakur, and spice to unflavored news. Each Sunday, we discuss race, politics, and culture from an unapologetic perspective, and we give you the opportunity to be heard. So leave your comments on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and we will read them throughout this show. And I know you guys have a lot to say because I've seen the comments. My name is Selena Hill, and I'm the founder of Be Heard Talk and the deputy digital editor at Black Enterprise. And I'm super excited to be here with you all to discuss everything from the biggest stories of the week, like Georgia's new Jim Crow voter suppression bill, to Chet Hanks' declaration that 2021 is, and I quote, white boy summer. Okay, later on in the show, we'll unpack Derrick Jaxn's cheating scandal and how this ties into toxic masculinity in the Black church, featuring Be Heard Talk's very own Stanley Fritz. Please support Be Heard Talk by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Be Heard Talk. Your support through a small donation will help us continue to support and amplify the issues that you care about. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest hosts for today's show, starting with Nkwa Asanye, who is a sportscaster and social commentator. He hosts Award Tour, the podcast, a show that covers the intersections of race, culture, and sports. And he is a renowned play-by-play broadcaster. How's it going, Nkwa?
Selena, thanks for having me. And usually I'm more loquacious than this, but I'm just ready to get started.
You aren't the only ones who are ready to get started. I see everybody already in the comments chiming in. We are going to unpack Derrick Jaxn. Just give us some time. That's later on in the show, so keep tuning in. So without further ado, we are also joined by Kay Asambito, who is a Bronx-bred storyteller with a love for Black culture, hip-hop, food, and network, and New York. Love that. You have seen him on Revolt. You have seen him on Double XL. And now you see him here on Be Heard Talk. How's it going, Kai?
Thank you for having me. First and foremost, it's great. I'm excited and I'm ready to jump into things.
Okay. Well, now that we are ready, we are going to start things off with the news roundup. Again, this is the segment where we talk about some of the biggest and most impactful stories of the week, the things that made you laugh, cry, or basically just go on a Twitter rant and like almost get deleted. So we're going to start off with the historic and notorious bill that was passed in Georgia. Last week, Georgia's Governor Brian Kemp signed a voter suppression law that will dramatically roll back access to the ballot box in the nation's most hotly contested battleground state. The law, which is the latest Republican effort to resurrect the Jim Crow era in an effort to steal elections, literally, and get this, criminalizes people who hand water to thirsty voters waiting in line. Now, the law also imposes new voter identification requirements for absentee ballots. It empowers state officials to take over local election boards, and it limits the use of ballot drop boxes. Now, the Republican governor signed the bill while surrounded by a half a dozen white men in front of a painting of a slave plantation, which you see right now. Meanwhile, while he was signing this bill with his all-white posse, a Black female Georgia lawmaker, Rep. Park Cannon, was arrested for knocking on the door of the governor to try to watch him sign the bill. She was charged with 2 felonies for obstruction of law enforcement and disruption of the General Assembly. Nkwa, what was your reaction and what message is the GOP governor sending about race and human rights in the American South through this law?
The sad part about all this is that I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, particularly in Georgia, the GOP has been very, very unabashed about restricting any sort of access to voters who are not guaranteed to vote in the way that they see fit. The message that they send, as always, is it's our state. We do what we want when we want. Anything that you do will always be held to a different standard. And like I said, as disheartening as it is, it's not surprising to me at all.
It really isn't. It's not surprising. It is sad. I know Michael R. Hasler just left a comment via LinkedIn. He says, "My birth state may still be a slave state." And I mean, honestly, that is what it's looking like. Kai, I want to get your thoughts on this. What was your reaction? And do you think these voter suppression tactics will actually be successful in helping Republicans win elections?
Yes, to answer your question, yes, I do believe it will help. It helps because like I just read that 13 in like 2000, about 13% of like black males couldn't vote due to like either previous felonies or like not paying certain fines, those kind of things. So just think about that's 13% of black men. If they find other ways, and some of the ways that are going to be restricted is voting. Ballot boxes rather can't be placed in certain areas, and who controls that? The Georgia, the government in Georgia, the governor Brian Kemp and his team. And to answer your question, yes, I do believe that it will impact and it will allow Republicans or whomever decides to, because I say that because Trump might be starting um, uh, um, his own party soon. So who knows? The Trump party might also take these tactics and run with them. But it will be helpful in pushing their agenda.
Well, we're definitely going to have to see how this plays out. Jarrell D. West left a comment via Facebook. She says, slave state, showing your ID is making you a slave. So it's way deeper than this. Like, you're clearly gaslighting and simplifying this. These laws disproportionately hurt and target voters of color, which overwhelmingly vote Democrat. Those are what the statistics are showing, because it's being extensive, it's an overreach, and it's basically trying to intimidate people from going to the polls. So there's no argument or disparity there. And Kwa, I want to get your reaction to that. And also, Stacey Abrams is allegedly thinking about running again. And for Georgia, for governor in Georgia, and I think like 2022. Do you think these type of tactics will help her lose the election?
We've seen it happen in Georgia before. In fact, her first run to the governorship involved the then governor Brian Kemp throwing out thousands of votes that would have gone her way. Even some of the new laws that were passed involved no voting on Sundays and made it illegal to hand out water on very long lines to the polls. And it was covered nationwide in the lead up to the November election. The fact that voting machines in predominantly urban, low-income black neighborhoods, there were always limited access. And you are also dealing with a population that's being told, hey, guess what? If you don't come to work, you don't have a job. They continue to stack the deck and then ask why people are so upset.
Absolutely. And, speaking of being upset, Natalie Turner from LinkedIn left a comment. She said, is there no faith in the power of our votes? Black Georgia voters are making moves to still show up. You're right, Natalie. Black voters in Georgia are still showing up and being defiant. My point is that they shouldn't have to go through such extreme measures. I mean, like the water thing, to criminalize those type of people, that's basically a scare tactic to show like, hey, if you make one wrong move at the voting booth, or, when you're lining up, you can go to jail. So, this is definitely a story that we're going to have to continue to watch and pay attention to. Shout out to all of the organizations that are suing the state and doing any and everything possible to make sure that voting rights are no longer being restricted in Georgia. With that said, we actually going to just keep things moving because, Nkwa, we need to talk about Chet Hanks. Like, what is your boy doing?
First of all, don't ever associate him with me. I know it's my first show and all, but that's just not fair. So, for those who are new to what's been going on, the 30-year-old actor and star of the Showtime series Your Honor declared on his Instagram post that, quote, white boy summer would be coming upon us. Of course, it's not enough that last year he decided to use a fake Jamaican patois accent. Oh no, he decided to take it a step further. Don't take my word for it. Let's go to the clip.
Hey guys, look, I just wanted to tap in really quick. I just got this feeling, man, that this summer is, it's about to be a white boy summer. You know, take it how you want. I'm not talking about like Trump, NASCAR type white. I'm talking about, me, John B, Jack Harlow type white boy summer. You know what I mean? Let me know if you guys can vibe with that and get ready, because I am.
And it's not enough that he had the audacity or even the caucasity to say what he said. It's the fact that he put himself in company he has no business being in. See, at least John B told us they don't know. Jack Harlow told us what's popping. All this dude gave us was the worst unseasoned type of commentary, white privilege, just everything bad. Please cut it out. I'd love to get everyone else's thoughts on this.
First of all, honestly, I thought Chet was trolling. Like, when I saw the video, I'm just like, he's not serious. Like, sir, it's been white boy summers for the last 400 plus years. You guys are white males with all the privilege in the world. What else do you want? So I can't tell what Chet is doing. Like, all I know is that I remember, and this was after he was speaking patois, and had a lot of us really upset because he just keeps, he's a culture vulture. He just keeps appropriating the culture. Then he came on Clubhouse to try to redeem himself. And us Black folks, a lot of us are very forgiving. So I remember being in the rooms and they were like, it's okay. No, it's not okay. Chet does not deserve an invite to the cookout. He's the same person that was using the N-word back in 2015. Like, he thinks he's down and he thinks he's cool, but he's not. And we need to put him back in his place.
And I feel like Twitter has been putting him in his place. He's been getting roasted since he made the comments.
It's just sad, though, because it seems, I'm starting to believe more and more, Selena, that this was sort of a troll. It's the engagement. It's trying to make Black Twitter especially sort of give them more clicks and more engagement so that they're covered by everybody from E to Complex, just because, hey, look, they're making a whole lot of noise about him. That means he's newsworthy. Sometimes you got to let people be irrelevant, and I really wish we had left him there.
Right, he definitely deserves a spot in that club.
And not only so, Raina Jones left a comment via LinkedIn. She says, "Is he saying white?" Please explain. Do you want to? What is Chet? Yes, that's what she's saying, Raina. He's saying that this is the summer that's going to be all about, and it's not just regular white boys. He was calling out the white boys with the swag, right? The white boys who try to talk and look a certain way. That's what he's saying.
Swag? But what swag?
John B got swag. Look, I'm not. John B got swag. Okay?
Sure, him, but Chet Hanks has swag. Like, really?
He's trying.
Right. He's trying. But I think, honestly, the more important question should be, is it going to be a hot boy summer or is it going to be a hot girl summer? And I only say that because, Sweetie and Quavo just broke up. And then we also know that, but on the other side of things, JT from the City Girls, she's cuffed up with Uzi right now. They tweet about the Love Fest. And then you had Megan Thee Stallion. She's cuffed up with Partisan. So I guess in helping making Chet a little irrelevant, we could redirect the convo to see who the real important questions about who is it going to be a hot boy summer or a hot girl summer.
It's going to be a hot everybody summer. Everybody is tired of COVID. Everybody wants to run around unmasked or hopefully with masks, but everyone wants to run around and do whatever they want. So it's going to be a hot people summer. I don't know about all that.
But let's keep it going. Go ahead, Enqua.
So the NCAA has come under fire this week and even last week because of the inequity that was involved in the women's national basketball tournament. Included in that is a movement started by 3 athletes from the Big Ten, one of the biggest conferences in collegiate sports, with a movement for the hashtag not NCAA property. There has been a lot of talk over the last 3 years, especially about the control of student athletes and their name, image, and likeness, which the NCAA has total control of. Besides the fact that while these athletes, especially for men's basketball, women's basketball, and college football, they do receive full scholarships, but they in turn are becoming revenue makers and have been revenue makers for their universities to the tunes of millions of dollars with the inability to cash in on everything that they've put forward. With that being said, the NCAA Board of Governors recently gave Mark Emmert, the president of the NCAA, a vote of confidence for how he's handled everything. Unsurprising? Of course. But what's your take on it?
Go ahead, Kai.
I mean, I feel like we'll be saying this all day today, but I'm not surprised. This conversation has been going on for a long time. These conversations, several conversations back to that, but I do believe that in the era that we're in, even stepping outside of sports, but just like culturally, a lot of things are being reevaluated, revised finally, whether it's from statues of slave owners being torn down in places to the laws and from in states to the laws, the rules and regulations in different colleges. But I do think specifically to the NCAA, I do believe within the next 5 years we're going to see a drastic change in how athletes are perceived, how they're allowed to utilize their image, and it will be one of those things that when it finally happens, people are going to be like, "Wow, it took this long for this to happen," kind of thing.
Well, we'll definitely have to see. I hope so. I mean, I just don't understand like that. Like the nonprofit, the organization makes $1 billion. Like, I don't understand why these student athletes are making these schools so much money, can't use their image and their likeness to make a profit. Like, I just, to me, just like the logic is a little off. So like, I don't follow sports that closely, but I'm just like, 1 + 1 = 2. What's the issue?
I mean, the big argument in collegiate sports, especially, is that the brand is about the university, right? The argument is largely that, oh, nobody would care about so and so if he didn't play at Duke, if he didn't play at UCLA, if he didn't play at North Carolina. But the fact of the matter is that Zion Williamson would have been Zion Williamson if he didn't go to Duke.
Right.
If we even want to take it further, Michael Jordan would have been Michael Jordan if he did not go to UNC. While there is a level of cachet that these programs bring to the table, it is nothing without the student athletes.
So Rachel Johnson chimed in with a great comment via Facebook. She says, legalize exploitation on our young men and women and their families that want success in getting out of poverty and oppression. Inqua, would you call it legalized exploitation?
It's a catch-22 because she is right because of the fact that these young men and women are on national TV and really don't get much to show for it. On the other side of that, there is the fact that it is an opportunity to get an education for free. I think that's something that sometimes is neglected in the conversation, especially since outside of the other sports, the big three that I just talked about, a lot of the other student athletes are either getting partial scholarships or no scholarships at all, depending on the program. But considering the fact that when these athletes make these millions of dollars, the coaches get paid, the ADs get paid, and yet they don't see a dime. So there is definitely a level of exploitation there.
Well, we'll have to leave it there and, continue to just switch gears a bit. Kai, we'll throw it over to you to talk about what is going on in hip hop.
Yes. So since you said hip hop, let's start with hip hop because we got some pop news today also. So first, I'm pretty sure we all know Bobby Shmurda is home. The rapper, Brooklyn-bred rapper, known for one of the biggest songs of the past, I'd say 5-10 years. Hot, Can I say the name of the song?
If you want, yeah. Go ahead.
I should have asked that earlier, but yeah. So Bobby Shmurda's biggest hit was "Hot Nigga" a few years ago. Had us all doing the dance, the shmutty dance. Had us all throwing a hat up in the sky, hoping that it would fall where it needed to fall. So he did some time. He was caught up in a lot of illegal things. Him and his crew. He served 6 years. He was released earlier this month, and now the breakdown, the details rather of his parole situation have been released. So there's a few things in there that people like Wendy Williams and a couple of a bit of the chat on Twitter has focused on is will he be able to maintain these strict rules? So some of they include rather things like no alcohol. I believe he can't be at bars. Of course, no gang affiliation, because that's tied into one of the things he got locked up for. He has an 8 p.m. curfew. He has to submit like substance abuse testing. He has to do counseling for aggression and anger. They have those separate, so I wonder how that works out. And then he also, this is probably my favorite part, he needs to make sure that he's seeking employment or that he's employed for the next 5 years. So I guess I give you guys that information, and you guys knowing Bobby Shmurda, is Bobby going to be able to survive these strict rules or not?
Here's what I think, because I just feel like they are setting this young man up to fail. He's a rapper. First of all, like the amount of work he does, the way to get paid, like before COVID, they would have to tour. There's no way you can work in this industry and not be out at night, because that's when concerts happen, and nightlife is a big part of just building your brand. Like it's something like these rules and restrictions are detrimental, not only for someone who's young, but someone who's in the hip hop industry. And I just feel like, the police departments have a notorious record of targeting people in hip hop and making sure that they're set up to fail. So look, I'm hoping and praying the best for Bobby. There's a video of him where he actually turned down a drink at a nightclub because he's trying to take these restrictions seriously, but it's a matter of time. Like we saw what happened to Meek Mills. He popped the Willie and went back to jail. So, I mean, it's ridiculous. And Kwa, you're on mute. Go ahead.
Not only is it ridiculous, it's unrealistic. It goes back, Selena, to what you were saying about what it means to actually be an artist in this industry. It is impossible to go to any of those places where he can actually make money and not be exposed to any of that. And I know it's tempting to say, oh, it's about discipline, or it's about this, or it's about that. It doesn't matter. Because now you've put this young man in a position where you're going to say, oh, get a job. So Bobby Shmurda is just going to go, what, work at McDonald's? He's not a regular guy. He's just not. He's Bobby Shmurda. He's going to be Bobby Shmurda. And these rules don't let him be Bobby Shmurda. It's ridiculous.
So I guess you guys don't think he'll make it. He'll make it past the parole.
Oh, he'll make it.
Okay.
Nobody wants to go back to jail. He'll make it. I just think that what they're making him do is just not appropriate.
Agreed.
Right. And next up in pop news, like I said earlier, with hip hop, now we got a little bit of pop. So the pop prince, some people disagree with that, but pop prince Justin Bieber, he just released his latest album. It's been getting pretty solid reviews. Anybody who's been following Justin over the past 3 or 4 years, know that he's been on I think Rolling Stone called it like a righteous path, but like the music, the lyrics, there's not much of the lyrics, but some of the lyrics, the videos, even his narrative on social, he supports different initiatives, and he's vocal about his support. He's started different conversations about like the lack of support for Black culture, the lack of appreciation for Black culture, about how he has benefited so much from Black culture. He's been one of the big voices about just presenting R&B as R&B, and not as pop. He's gotten flack for that also. A whole nother convo. But the righteous pop prince Justin Bieber released his latest album. It's called Justice, and on it he includes two clips of speeches from the Dr. Martin Luther King. And he's gotten, I would say, some flack for it. The one clip is at the beginning of the album, and then another is an actual interlude on the album. So of course Twitter has been chopping him up. Does he have the right to use it? Is he, with him being somebody who is in a privileged position, does he really identify with the ideology or the narrative of what MLK spoke to, especially with the speeches? On like the more critical side, some have argued that the speeches don't really speak to the album. It's a love album. It's talking about marriage, and the content is definitely great content, but it doesn't speak to the righteousness that the two speeches speak to. So he's been getting a little, like I said, chopped up on the internet for including it. So I pose the question to you guys: how do you feel about Justin including these MLK speeches on the album?
Well, I say it's, if he wants to, quote Martin Luther King, kudos to him. But the way he's doing it, it feels like he's misusing it. Like, for instance, in one part where Dr. King is saying injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. After he says that, then Justin just goes into a love song dedicated to his wife called Too Much. So it's like, what's the context, right? And then he plays another part of the clip, as you just said, Kai, and then he's just talking about like love, and which is great. Look, I love his relationship with Hailey Bieber, but why are you misusing Dr. King's quotes? It just doesn't make sense. It feels like he's misusing the quotes for his own justice, right? If you've been following Justin Bieber's career, we know that he had a very tumultuous teenage years in the public spotlight where he was a brat. He really was. Like, he was like fighting fans and cursing people out. He was a brat. And now he's trying to redeem himself. And it kind of feels like the justice he's seeking is for himself. You hear on this album, nowhere on this album do you hear him talking about, Black Lives Matter or liberation or freedom. It's like, he wants the justice. And I'm like, bro, like, you up there with Chet Hanks right now with this white boy summer, because you're trying to make everything about you.
I just want to understand what the thought process was. Like, did he think that putting clips of Martin Luther King Jr. in there means that more black people are going to listen to him?
Well, just
Did
to
he
add,
think that he was going to be a tribute to Dr. King, despite the fact that there was no context there? Look, everything about this is confusing to me. Maybe it's just because I don't put anything past anybody anymore, but this is just, it's nonsensical. It makes no sense why he would do this, and it doesn't further his cause. It doesn't further any of the causes that Dr. King stood for or spoke about either. Like, it's just a reach for publicity again, and it's enough, yo, enough.
I would say, like, I slightly disagree. I definitely don't think Justin should be in a check in that box. I'm willing to send Chet on his way. Because one of the things, just add, I guess maybe not, but add a little bit of context. Justin did speak on using the MLK speeches, and he did say it, part of it was to like amplify the voice of MLK. He said that him being Canadian, he wasn't as educated on MLK and all that MLK was until he got a little older. So for him, this was a way to like amplify the voice, or at least introduce the voice to a generation. Or maybe not even just a new generation, but just a new region, just a new group of people who aren't as privy as us Americans. I don't think it was a complete publicity jump, because his last two albums have been like his least, like first week wise, his least selling. Like, he used to be like a monster, like go gold in a week, and now he's doing like 100K. So his career isn't necessarily benefited from these kind of moves. So I don't know if it was a publicity stunt. I think his heart might be in the right place. I guess another question, if I can ask, is there like I guess where does the line get drawn from because like we had Chet earlier who's clearly trolling and shouldn't be given any sort of attention for the stuff he's talking about. You have someone like Justin who feels like he has a voice, a platform to share things that he wasn't, I guess, educated on, kind of thing. But he's getting flack for it because it's like, is he even in the position to do that? So, what's your thoughts on that? I guess.
Here's the line for me. And before I answer that, I actually want to go to Pam Matthews' comment via LinkedIn. Pam says, white privilege makes you do foolish things. Educate yourself first. And to answer your question, Kai, I think that's the issue here. I just feel like it's a lack of education. Justin has spoke on the record saying that growing up in Canada, he was not really exposed to Dr. King. And now he is doing, due diligence and research to educate himself about the civil rights struggle here in America. But I feel like it's being misplaced. Like he wants to raise awareness. And I know Kimberly, she left a comment on Facebook saying, could it be that he wanted to bring more awareness? That's how I took it. You can raise awareness, but again, you have to do it in an appropriate fashion that makes sense, that doesn't make you look like you're just profiting off of this man's words. Because again, throughout the whole album, I don't feel Black liberation. I don't feel, some type of call for freedom and, and an end of oppression. Reviews are saying that most of the album is dedicated to his wife and it's about him. So why are you using this word, these, Dr. King's words, if this is about you?
And in addition to that, right, I'm still trying to figure out how a pop star who has been in the limelight for over a decade doesn't have the right people around him to actually facilitate what he was trying to do. Because if that was his goal, then it was sloppily done. And even so, is Justin Bieber really somebody I want talking about Black liberation under any circumstance? No, never.
Wow. That being said, we can talk about Justin all day. I still like his music, disclaimer, but he didn't have to do that with with Martin Luther King. Like, figure it out, Justin. Anyway, that being said, thank you, Kai, for bringing up those two stories and bringing it to our attention. We are going to just switch gears to, if you're already, pretty hyped up, I think you're going to get just as, upset, just like I am, because it's time to talk about the recent cheating scandal that has sent shockwaves throughout the Black community and sparked innumerable memes, videos, comments, and talks on Clubhouse. There was this one room about Derrick Jaxn for over 24 hours on Clubhouse. And of course, I was in it. For those of you who don't know, Derrick Jaxn is a popular social media relationship expert and author who happens to be a married Christian man who has been exposed as a serial cheater by a woman he is said to have known for 10 years. Now, on March 22nd, Jaxn and his wife, Danita Jaxn, they went on Instagram to openly discuss his transgressions. Let's play a clip of Danita and Derrick Jaxn talking about this whole controversy on Instagram.
But the truth is, and I'm saying it here now, is that Derrick Jaxn was involved with other women outside the marriage. And by involved, I want to be clear, I'm not talking about just casually kicking it, maybe a lunch or something like that. I'm talking about as serious as sex, to sexual flirtation and meeting up and that kind of thing. And some things that otherwise may be considered okay by some in terms of like just chatting or checking on people or being checked on by people that I've had a previous encounter with. But without my wife's knowledge of it and with us having a sexual history, all of it falls under the umbrella of inappropriate, cheating, affair, stepping out. Definitely not in alignment with the vows that I took, and definitely not in alignment with the biblical standard of what it means to be faithful, which is the standard that I'm going by now.
So that was a little clip of Derrick Jaxn, talking about himself in third person. And if you watch the whole thing, it just kind of felt like gaslighting. Like he was like, we had sexual encounter, like the way he was just phrasing it, sexual flirtation, like, bro, like you've been cheating, and it's not just like one time, it's been 10 years reportedly. So that being said, he goes on to explain the whole, you know, the misconduct on his part. He talks about God, he talks about redemption, but for a lot of us it didn't feel really authentic. Now, in addition to this, as shocking as these details are, recently it appears that another woman has come forward and adding her 2 cents to Jaxn's dirty laundry. Another alleged side chick claimed that Derrick was filming his famous car videos outside of her home, and that she even had contact with him on March 18th. That was what, last week or 2 weeks ago? The mistress also claimed that she was pregnant with his baby. So again, this is a deeply intimate relationship. It's not all just sexual flirtation. And I think the reason why, you know, this is a conversation that we're having in our group chats and all over social media is because a lot of us feel betrayed, especially Black women, because that was his targeted audience, right? He was peddling a product of self-love and healthy relationships, but he turned out to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. So a lot of us feel like, hey, you know, I paid for the book. I read the book. I paid for his course. I broke up with my man listening to Derrick Jaxn. And now look, he was cheating this whole time. So we have a lot to talk about, and to have this conversation, we are actually inviting Be Heard's very own Stanley Fritz to the conversation. Stanley, I want to just throw it to you first. What was your reaction to the controversy?
Well, this is the last time I'm going to wear my Black Men Don't Cheat hoodie because Derrick messed it up for all of us. So no more of this, Selena. No more of that. You know, it's a pot calling the kettle black. But 2 things can be true. Derrick could have given good relationship advice and still be a hypocrite and a narcissist and ashy and a clout chaser and an embarrassment to his wife and his family.
Well, expand on that a little bit, Stanley, because you're saying that he's giving good relationship advice even though he's trash at his own relationship. How does that go?
That's very simple because like the fundamental principles of a relationship are communication, accountability, honesty, and humility. And anyone can teach those things. That doesn't mean you got to practice it. You know, Donald Trump was talking about Christian values and putting kids in cages and blowing up other countries. Like anybody can do that. So I'm not surprised that this man has done that. The thing that bothers me the most is the lengths that he's gone to not only embarrass his wife and his family, but then clearly build clout off of this. This is a man I can't respect.
So Pam Matthews left a comment. She says via LinkedIn, hypocrisy is never excuse for inappropriate behavior. I agree with you there. Unqua, what did you think about his apology in particular? Do you think it was gaslighting? Hold on, Inqua, you're on mute. Go ahead now.
He didn't apologize.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like I know we're live, and I know that I would like to avoid using non-air friendly words here, but that apology wasn't an apology. It was total BS. The fact that he sat up there with his wife next to him, almost like a crutch to fix his face to say, I did this, and you know, I'm sorry, but God is going to forgive me, and there's more coming back from this. Like, no, there was no actual contrition in his words. And the sad part about it is, it bothered me more that he actually went into detail about what he did, because it's not us he has to answer to. It's God and his wife. And yet we're all a part of this because there's something else that he wants to give or some other reaction that he does want to bring out of his intended audience. So, yeah, it's sad.
So Antoinette Cook left a comment via Facebook. She says, Derrick better be careful because she looked like if she looked like she can snap on him, it's all over. But the shouting, just look at her continence. Thank you for pointing that out, because I think for a lot of us during the apology video, his wife looks so uncomfortable, Danita. And I actually been doing a lot of digging into, you know, her public persona and what she's been putting out, if you guys go down her Instagram rabbit hole, and I suggest you don't, she's put out a lot of disturbing content. Now, I haven't seen her directly call out Derrick, but she said for 10 years she had to watch another woman have sex with someone that she felt very like deeply for, and that she started comparing herself, and that like it basically, like, reading this account, which was very disturbing, it sounded like, my assumption was, did Derrick force his wife to watch him have sex with somebody else to sort of like try to teach her? Because she talks about how obsessed she became with this woman and how bad she felt about herself. Then, you know, in some other videos I was watching about Zanita, it looked like she may have, you know, some type of disturbance. She suffered from trauma. She's talked about rape, and now she's going through this with Derrick Jaxn on a public display. It's so sad. It's so sad. I can go on and on, but Kai, I want to get your voice in here, because you told me offline that it's people who are giving Derrick too much power, and that, you know, it's the consumers that are just feeding too much into him. Do you think consumers should take responsibility for putting Derrick on a pedestal?
Well, absolutely. Our short answer, completely, because so I'm of course not familiar with him prior to the scandal, and then once I found out a little bit about him, I'm like, okay, so he starts blogging after his mess ups led to him losing his college and his high school sweetheart, and then like he worked on himself. They worked together, and then they built their lives after that. So to see years down the line this happen, it's like, okay, how he started his career, he's the same, maybe not the same person, because no one just the same, but so I say that to say I'm not surprised that someone who started a career off of mistakes will make a mistake. He's written like a bunch of books, so I know that there's going to be another book. Like, if I'm not mistaken, the book is actually called A Cheating Man's Heart. So he speaks on, and then I watched, not many, I'm not gonna act like I know a lot about the guy, but I watched a few of the videos, and he's like it don't seem like he perpetuates a perfect image. It seems like he breaks down the rights and wrongs in relationships on from things that women should look out for it in terms of a bad mate on their end, things that guys should look out.
So you see what you're saying?
So
he describes himself. It sounds like you're saying he describes himself.
You're breaking up. Say it again.
I said it sounds like to me he's describing himself. He's saying, "Hey, ladies, these are the traits you need to look out for a bad man," and he's actually talking about himself. If you listen to the 30-minute creepy apology video, and you listen to the wife speak, it's very obvious to me that he's a serial cheater. This has been going on for quite some time. This is not new to her, and that might explain why she is that way. And I just think it's very listen, there's nothing wrong with being imperfect. There's nothing wrong with being in process. There's nothing wrong with using your mistakes and the places you've fallen short to try to teach other people to do it. But there's a difference between trying to use your mistakes to help educate others and trying to use a certain brand so you can make money off of it. Over the last 2-3 years now, it's become really popular for men to talk about patriarchy, to talk about sexism, to talk about healthy relationships, and then model none of the things that they talk about. And those are the dudes who want to make believe that they are allies, but they're actually violating and disrespecting women. If you listen to his wife, she said, the reason I came back to him was because he changed. Before, I didn't have a voice. I didn't have a say in anything. And now he's letting me have a say. What? He would just do whatever he wanted to do, and I would just find out about it. Now, listen, I don't know Derrick. I don't know his wife, and I'm not going to criticize him because I'm not going to go after somebody who got stabbed in the back and is trying to figure out a way to heal themselves. But that man sounds like an abuser.
And the worst part about it is that we saw this even take place in the reaction video to his apology in the third person. What kind of sociopathic behavior is that? And within that video, he excused himself. He absolved himself. Selena talked about at the top of the segment how he posited himself to be a Christian man. And yet, there's no humility. There's no actual contrition. There's no humility. There's no way for him to even think of saying, you know what? he was wrong here. Everything was about, I'm glad he took accountability. I'm glad he did this. I'm glad he did that. He patted himself on the back for serially abusing and cheating on his wife. What a disgrace.
But that's a relationship with two people, and if his wife left him after she found out that he was cheating and decided to go back because she felt that like he did whatever he needed to do to be what she needed him to be, I don't think that's any of our place. Like, I don't think we're the harborers of like who's on what side of right and wrong kind of thing. So that for that part, but in terms of like everything else, he sells books and he sells content. This is content for him, I think. And like in other industries, images are creating. Like Beyonce was created as a perfect image.
So Kai, just to clarify, are you saying that he's a content creator and we're being too quick to judge?
Not that we're being too quick, but yes, in certain instances, absolutely, we are absolutely, because people are saying he's abusing her, and until she tells us these things are going on, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. So yes, we are absolutely jumping too quick to judge. But beyond that, in terms of the hoopla around like him, because one of the questions is like people feel like he let them down, or people feel like he betrayed them, and my thing is he's a content creator. Like you guys, the same way people listen to podcasts, like if Joe Rogan go do some craziness, people don't be like, oh, how could he do that? Like they only check him for whatever they get from that podcast. So for me, this guy isn't like the Pope, nor is he like he's a guy who started blogging, and people, and he like my female friends are familiar with him because he's an attractive man. So that also can play a role into like why people might want to pay attention to him. That doesn't mean he is the harbinger of.
Stanley, does the responsibility fall on consumers here, to Kai's point?
Well, I mean, yes and no. But at the same time, to kind of respond to Kai's point from earlier, if you have somebody who says they're a doctor and they're a successful surgeon, and then you find out they botched 100 surgeries, and then they go on social media and start talking about Jesus and how they mess up, but it ain't happening no more. But then the people they work with is like, yeah, but it happened a lot before, but I forgive them. Would you have some thoughts? Because this man positions himself as a relationship expert. This man positions himself as somebody you should listen to, and then he had a very egregious fall from grace. So that's the first problem. Then the next problem is this man has caused deep harm to his wife and his family, and then put it on social media. So we get to judge because he put himself on the Summer Jam screen, but did not even apologize, did not say how he was going to correct his behavior, did not hold accountability, and is still there for 30 minutes talking about how God touched him, and God is this and God is that. And now listen, he could be doing the work to improve as a husband, and if his wife wants to stay with him in her business, that's her choice. But as somebody who's in the public, responding to a very public case of infidelity, that this man then amplified even more through a 30-minute video than a 7-minute video. So folks who didn't want to watch a full 30 minutes can watch 7 minutes, and then a reaction video. Like at that point, this is not about accountability. This is about you getting likes and clicks and selling books. And you know who's going to suffer from that? His kids. That same kid that he had to stop talking on the camera for to go check on, when that kid is old enough to get on the internet, they're going to find out their daddy was cheating on their mother all over the streets and then had her on IG Live and YouTube Live and all of this stuff, holding his hand and giving him cover. Like, so if we want to talk about like gender roles and masculinity, and I think gender is a construct, but that's not man business. A real man doesn't do that.
Well, let's actually talk about that, Stanley, because hold on, Kai. Gender roles definitely do come into play here. And, Stanley, you mentioned a lot how he has called for forgiveness and redemption. He's calling on the name of Jesus, for forgiveness. And his wife said in the video, I forgive him. And she made a follow-up video saying that Jesus is saving him or can save him, something to that effect. Inqua, to me, this kind of feels like almost very uncomfortable, number one, and almost a reflection of what happens not a little too often for my comfort in the Black church. Do you think that, this situation is a bad reflection of the church? And do you also think that, Derrick Jaxn is maybe a reflection of Black men in the church, Black Christian men?
You know, the sad part about it, Selena, is that we in the church have really bastardized what grace really means. Like, we have taken it to mean that because of God's grace, we can do whatever we want. And when we align that within the patriarchy that does exist in the Black church, it is an accurate reflection, because he felt like he had the moral high ground to continue to do these things. And the fact that he could then say God has forgiven him without providing any proof of accountability to us, the public, or even to his wife. Because sometimes when you watch a couple act in public, you can tell when things are off or not off. But even if we want to escape conjecture completely, we have to really take a hard look at ourselves and what we as Black men allow ourselves to do in the church. Accountability is super, super important, and the lack thereof makes this more tragic than it should be.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And I know, Stanley, when you were speaking, you touched on the gender roles, you touched on the toxic masculinity. And, there are some ways that also shows up in the Black church very, very often. What do you think about that?
Selena, you know that I am not the fondest of the church in general. I like to think I'm indifferent to it at this point. But one of the challenges I have with the church is that its strong emphasis on having women submit to their men and quote unquote follow the lead of their men, whether those men are qualified, whether those men are deserving, whether those men actually have anything to lead you to. And this very much lands as like this woman trying to be a good wife and follow the steps of Christ. And the Black church particularly, which, before I decided that I wasn't going to live that life, emphasizes uplifting men, forgiving men, making space for men in a way that they don't make space for women. So once you say you have been absolved, you are absolved, and that is it. And so it is said, so it shall be. But no, it ain't. Because that woman is hurt. And those kids are traumatized. And, we really got to shift the way that we look at masculinity. We really got to shift the way that we look at accountability. Because just because you have sexual urges does not mean you have to act on them. Men can have sexual discipline as well.
And even if I can add something to that, we talk about the role of manhood and what it means to raise a family and what it means to actually train up a child in the way that he or she or they should go. And yet we've seen no evidence that that's actually a priority for him. Because as Stanley said, a lot of excuses are made for men when they have other families, when they're not home, when they provoke their kids instead of actually listening to them and raising them, when they choose to dominate their wives instead of actually loving her as Christ loves the church. We need to get back to that.
Well said there. Kai, I definitely want to get your voice back into the conversation because, I think that you represent a lot of us who are very dismissive towards it, who think hey, we're giving him too much attention. On the other side, the flip side to that is, but he's, reflective or he symbolizes a lot of the hurt and pain that Black women, Black Christian women in particular, feel subjected to, especially those of us who are trying to live, according to the Bible, and according to certain standards. So, Kai, what is your take on everything?
I think those people should find solace in real Christian leaders or whatnot. But I even speaking to the toxic masculinity part of it, I'm not an expert in that concept at all. But just from the stuff that I've learned, it's a man is supposed to be manly and not supposed to admit when he do the wrong thing. A man isn't supposed to be expressive and open up emotionally, those kind of things. And it seems like throughout his career, Derrick has kind of shown those sorts of things. And him having a public mess up, him being a public person, living kind of his life in the public world, allows people to respond to everything, the good and the bad kind of thing. So I feel like if I was somebody, one of the people we spoke about earlier, that attached to his image or what he presents as opposed to being a real human. To me, this is a part of why I would buy the next book. Because if I came along in the beginning and you were a cheater or whatever, and that's what got me into you as a fan, then this will keep me into you as a fan. If people were looking at him as the savior of their relationships, once again, I don't think him making a mistake takes away from anything that if he gave you good advice, take the good advice and be thankful that you got good advice. But I don't think you should, if you got good advice, you should say, well, a bad person, he's not a bad person. I don't know how to call him a bad person, but a person who did something wrong gave me good advice. Let me not.
I think for many of us, and you know, somebody wrote about this on Essence. I think for many Black women, they don't feel like they no longer feel like they can buy into his brand because we know it's inauthentic. Like we know that everything he's preaching and the guys that he's bashing, he's really talking about himself. So, like to your point, you know, you have someone who is a great orator, but if you're not walking the walk, then get off the podium. Like, I just don't want to hear from you. That's my take on that. We actually do have to begin to start wrapping up this conversation. But before we do, Enqua, what needs to be done so that Black women in particular aren't being preyed upon when it comes to, like, you know, different products or different, you know, peddlers of these type of messages? What needs to be done so our Black women instead are uplifted and protected in the community?
Honestly, it really starts with listening, and it starts with listening intentionally. I have learned through trial and error that there are so many opportunities to have conversations with our women. But the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we actually listening to understand where she's coming from and what she's trying to say? Or are we trying to immediately respond and defend ourselves regardless? But I don't think anything can start to be done unless we as men make sure that we listen.
Thank you. And, you know, Stanley, I want to get your final words on just, you know, you touched upon using Christian values as a way to gaslight. What advice would you give from afar to those of us who are still in the church about just equality and protecting Black women?
If you're a lover of Jesus, these ideas they teach you about just completely submitting to a man, zero accountability, do as I say, not as I do, that goes against everything Jesus Christ wanted. Jesus would not support that. That's for the Christian folks. And you can feel free to roll your eyes because I'm definitely a proud atheist. Having said that, to go back to Derrick, listen, no one is perfect. We will all end up on that Summer Jam screen at one point or another for the mistakes that we made. Our lives are defined by mistakes, but it's also defined by what we do after those mistakes. Whether you're willing to stand up and be accountable and change your behavior, whether you dig in and hold strong, or like in this case, whether you try to use it as an opportunity to make money. The fact of the matter is, Derrick Jaxn, whatever his name is, can give good relationship advice, but it's also true that he cheated on his wife with multiple women now. And according to that 30-minute video, he cheated on her multiple times in 2016 before they were even married. So this is not a case of a simple mistake. This is a situation of a pattern. And if we're not willing to call out patterns and hold people accountable, you will continue to create universes where there are men like this who think they can say and do whatever they want because people will always forgive them. And that is a much larger thing we're facing here. There are too many men who have bad behavior, exhibit bad behavior, and we forgive them because the church and Jesus told you to, because a woman's supposed to follow by her man, or because boys will be boys. And we've got to break that cycle because every time a Derrick Jaxn gets away with this, there's another young boy who's watching that, and now he thinks it's okay to repeat this behavior. And the only people who suffer when this happens are women. And as we can see right here, Black women. And I'm not for that.
Kai, we're actually running out of time. We have about 10 seconds left, but I want to get your final thoughts in about 10 seconds on just the whole Derrick Jaxn scandal and toxic masculinity.
Look out for that next book.
Wow.
Thank you, Kai, for keeping it short. And I just want to wrap things up because, you know, the deeper we dig into this, I think the more we see ourselves. the fact that Derrick Jaxn, again, he purported to be something, this holier than thou type of character. He was constantly blasting and putting down other men, black men in particular, and then he turned out to be that person. And for a lot of times, for a lot of us, that's, you know, how we like to operate, right? We want to pretend to be something. We put on our best faces at work, and, you know, we're completely different people at home. You know, we go to family functions and we act like we're the family man and a family woman. And then when we're in our own homes, how do we treat our family? So I think that this lesson, the lesson learned here for me, is about walking in authenticity. Right? Do not pretend to be one thing when you know you are living a lie, because whatever is done in the darkness will be brought to light. And you don't want to be the next Derrick Jaxn. So get it together, especially if you're pushing these messages and making profit off of it. And in my opinion, preying on Black women and vulnerable people who are gobbling this up. You will get caught. There's only a certain amount of time that these wolves in sheep clothing will keep walking around. It's going to come off. The mask is definitely going to come off. And on that note, I want to thank everyone for chiming in to Be Heard Talk today. If you liked what you saw or want to support us so that we can support your causes and your messages, please buy us a coffee. You can go to buymeacoffee.com, and that support that you give will continue to keep us on the air and doing what we do, supporting your causes. We will not be back for next Sunday because it is Resurrection Sunday, but we will see you guys all in 2 weeks. So we'll see you then.